Keiko was a young male orca captured in 1979 off the coast of Iceland. Removed from wild waters, he was swept into the gilded aquarium circuit that defined late 20th century marine entertainment. He arrived at Marineland in Niagara Falls, Ontario, as a tourist spectacle, and later was moved to Reno Aventura in Mexico City, where his performances fed a global trade in captive whales. For more than a decade, he was shuffled between concrete tanks and theme park stages, becoming an emblem of an industry that valued novelty over natural history. In the 1980s and 1990s, scientists had limited data on the physiology, social bonds, and navigation skills of free-ranging Orcinus orca, and the idea of rewilding a whale long habituated to humans remained speculative and understudied. Activists and ethicists raised concerns at times, but public indifference and the profitability of displays kept pressure for reform low. Keiko's name meant little beyond park marketing until his on-screen role in the movie Free Willy turned him into a symbol of rescue and redemption. That celebrity made him a test case for whether an animal kept in captivity for decades could be returned to the Atlantic. But at the time of his capture, the practice was routine, legally sanctioned, and largely accepted. In the summer of 1993, Simon Winsor's family film, Free Willy, opened in American theaters on July 16th and turned a little-known captive orca into a global symbol. The movie starred Jason James Richter and Keiko, whose real-life home at Reno Aventura in Mexico City became central to the story. Audiences reacted not just to the plot, but to the image of a single whale kept in concrete tanks. Photographs and television reports in late 1993 and 1994 showed Keiko thin, scarred, and isolated, and those images crystallized public outrage. Press coverage in major outlets pushed the debate from theme park margins to front pages and talk shows, and ordinary people who had never noticed captive marine mammals suddenly demanded change. Maybe clicking subscribe would have saved him. That cultural surge produced concrete action. Petitions, phone campaigns, celebrity endorsements, and grassroots fundraising coalesced into organized advocacy for Keiko. Movie fans, animal welfare groups, and private donors began raising money and pressuring park owners and governments for better veterinary care and for a plan that went beyond simply building a larger tank. Negotiations with Reno Aventura, Mexican authorities, and potential U.S. partners unfolded through 1994 and 1995, and by 1996, the idea had hardened into an unprecedented project. Not just rehabilitation, but a staged return to his native North Atlantic waters. The shift from commercial exhibit to conservation test case created immediate pressure points, logistics, law, funding, and scientific uncertainty that needed solutions. Keiko's celebrity had created momentum, public capital, and a coalition willing to attempt something long considered impractical, treating a decades captive Orcinus orca as a candidate for rewilding rather than permanent display, setting the stage for the complex rehabilitation that followed. In 1996, Keiko was transferred to the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport, Oregon, and the mission shifted from spectacle to stern, surgical remediation. Aquarium veterinarians stabilized infections, treated chronic scars and malnutrition from years in concrete tanks, and replaced processed park feed with a steady regimen of fresh herring and mackerel to rebuild muscle and condition. Staff and the Free Willy Keiko Foundation faced a publicity paradox. Newspaper photographers and television crews funded rehabilitation, but their glare reinforced Keiko's dependence on humans by attracting crowds and handlers. Trainers launched a program to restore predatory behaviors, live fish sessions, controlled pursuit exercises, and conditioning to chase whole fish rather than accept handouts. Yet every successful chase in a pen remained an approximation of hunting in the North Atlantic. Scientists from NOAA and independent researchers pressed for measurable benchmarks: sustained weight, healed wounds, and spontaneous sea surface foraging, while some advocates pushed public relations milestones that risked a premature release. Logistical hurdles multiplied: permits to move a 6,000-pound cetacean, chartering heavy-lift aircraft, and designing modular sea pens that could be relocated to subarctic waters required international negotiation with Icelandic authorities and port officials. Funding shortfalls forced compromises. Donors wanted visible victories. Scientists insisted on caution. Ethical dilemmas sharpened daily. Should trainers reduce human contact even if it slowed trust-based medical care? Could veterinary intervention be limited to encourage natural resilience without endangering the animal? Organizational tensions between the Oregon Coast Aquarium, the Free Willy Keiko Foundation, and federal regulators created conflicting timelines. All the while, Keiko's health improved, and plans to transfer him to Iceland in 2002 hardened, setting a fraught rendezvous between celebrity-driven hope and the cold, unyielding demands of the North Atlantic wild, and propelling the team toward the decisive trials ahead. After conditioning at the Oregon Coast Aquarium, Keiko was relocated in 2002 from Newport, Oregon to coastal Iceland under the oversight of the Free Willy Keiko Foundation, Oregon Coast Aquarium staff, and cooperating Icelandic authorities. The move was presented as the pivotal step toward full reintroduction to the North Atlantic. In Icelandic waters, he was first kept in a seaside enclosure and then gradually given more access to the open ocean. Within months, he began making repeated open water swims away from the pen, surfacing alone for hours and taking whole herring and mackerel with increasing skill, clear signs his musculature and predatory abilities were improving. Measured weight recovery, healed scars, and spontaneous surfacing in wild seas looked like vindication of the medical and behavioral program. But progress was partial and ambiguous. Keiko continued to seek out human contact, approaching boats and hauling himself close to caretakers on decks, behaviors that undermined hopes for full wild independence and risked dangerous habituation. Attempts to integrate him with local orca groups produced only fleeting associations. Wild pods investigated him and individual whales tolerated or briefly swam alongside him, but true social assimilation, such as mother-caliber bonds, coordinated pod hunting, and culturally learned migration, did not occur. Funding strains narrowed options. The Free Willy Keiko Foundation and private donors covered running costs, but could not sustain long-term monitoring at scale, and scientific advisors, including NOAA, warned that you cannot draw broad policy conclusions from a single celebrity-driven experiment. The result was mounting tension, visible signs of independence that inspired hope, yet persistent human dependence and social isolation that raised serious doubts about whether Keiko's fate could serve as a reliable model for rewilding captive orcas. Keiko's final chapter unfolded on December 12, 2003, when he was found dead in Norwegian coastal waters after months away from Iceland. In the weeks before his death, he had been swimming with wild killer whales and repeatedly approaching vessels and seeking human contact, a pattern documented by the Free Willy Keiko Foundation, staff at the Oregon Coast Aquarium, and Norwegian observers. Norwegian veterinarians performed a necropsy, and reports from the Norwegian Veterinary Institute and local authorities described severe lung disease, acute pneumonia with extensive pulmonary inflammation, systemic bacterial infection, and poor body condition. The autopsy ruled the immediate cause of death as respiratory collapse resulting from those complications. The findings made a stark point. Keiko had regained muscle, was taking whole herring, and had experienced open ocean freedom, yet he remained tethered to humans and vulnerable to disease. The spectacle that rescued him, celebrity fundraising, international transport, and intensive care, had bought him months of life and dignity, but it may also have prolonged a human dependence that increased health risks. His death closed the experiment in orca rehabilitation and forced hard questions about ethics, scalability, and the limits of celebrity-driven conservation. Keiko's death forced a sober reckoning. The high-profile rescue that gave him months of dignity also exposed the limits of celebrity-driven conservation, a gilded experiment that could not replace decades of social learning. Public attitudes shifted as movie audiences became activists, fueling campaigns that helped end routine captures and brought greater scrutiny to marine parks in the 1990s. Policymakers tightened standards for cetacean display, veterinary care, and transport, and rescue organizations adopted stricter protocols for rehabilitation and release. Yet Keiko also revealed a larger truth. One celebrated case cannot prove that rewilding is scalable. Future efforts need clear scientific baselines, behavioral norms, health metrics, long-term telemetry ethical frameworks that minimize human habituation, realistic objectives, and secure multi-year funding plus sustained monitoring. Keiko's tragic arc remains a cautionary beacon. Hope must be yoked to humility.